It's Nick 2, and today I'm going to be showing you guys the incredibly powerful Rogue Trapper build. This is going to help you get all the way up to level 100 with a very consistent high damage output build. And one of the better things about this is with all the crowd control and with all the trap modifiers that we get to take advantage of, it's really going to help with our survivability. Poison Trap is just a fantastic skill for really increasing the consistency of your gameplay, knocking down enemies, getting a permanent CC chain. It's just really helpful. There's a ton of stuff that we can take advantage of here. But also Death Trap is just one of the most satisfying skills to ever use in the game when you're in like a massive pack and you throw it down and it just nukes everything, and you have so many enemies around that you get all the cooldown back and you get to throw it down again. It is just an insane amount of fun. The power of this build is just undeniable, and this can easily get you all the way up to level 100. So if you're a fan of traps, this build is absolutely fantastic. If you're a little bit like me and you prefer the play style of using some shadow stuff, feel free to check out the Shadow Rogue build. For those of you guys that have watched that video already and you're wondering why the swap, I'm just making this video because a lot of people do really like the traps, and I think it is kind of just a different play style sort of thing. I think both builds have their merits and they are both incredibly powerful. So if you're playing the Shadow build, don't worry, I'm probably going to make an updated version of that one pretty soon here, so leave it down in the comments if you guys want to see that. But anyways, let's just get into the video. Again, I'm only level 90, so this is not going to be like incredibly in-depth. Once I'm level 100 and my gear is literally best in slot, I'll probably have a very in-depth version of this. However, I'm going to post this on my website, so feel free to check that out, link in the description, if you want to be able to quickly copy the skill points, and also I'll be updating that over time with, alternative legendary options, etc. So let's get into the skills. As I'm sure you saw in the gameplay, there were times where I was actually not using a basic skill, which a lot of people were asking me about, and I was using Shadow Imbuement instead. The reason for this is I was just speed clearing and speed farming dungeons, and you can take Puncture off in that scenario, but I took the build into Nightmare Dungeons without using Puncture, and it felt a little bit weird and just not as consistent. And you also need Puncture for a couple of different things. I'd say for the 99% of you guys, keep Puncture on, but if you want to try min-max and you want to try some crazy stuff, you can take Puncture off and add Shadow Imbuement to get even more AoE, but for most of you guys, you want to keep Puncture. So we're going to be playing Puncture for the vulnerable application here, and you get a little bit of energy back anytime you damage a crowd-controlled enemy, and pretty much every enemy we fight is going to be crowd-controlled, so that's really nice. Twisting Blades, obviously, Twisting Blades, not even going to talk about it. Dash and Shadow Step. Dash and Shadow Step gives you a lot of mobility. Dash has the crit damage modifier, which is really powerful. Shadow Step gives you 8% crit chance. It's going to stun enemies, but you also pretty much need Shadow Step because it gives you unstoppable. A lot of the times when you're doing higher tier content, you're just going to get stun locked all the time. You can just Shadow Step out of a stun lock, and that is very good. Poison Trap, I honestly don't like this skill at all, but the problem is that it is just so good because of this modifier here. Poison Trap knocks down enemies for 1.7 seconds when it activates. The fact that it is just a guaranteed knockdown is very good. When an enemy gets knocked down, they just fall over and you could just beat the crap out of them. But also, there's just a ton of modifiers in the game that work against traps and against poisoned that you get to take advantage of with this build that you otherwise can't take that much of advantage of. Personally, I hate this skill because it is just such a small radius, but even though I hate it that much, it is still really powerful, and I can't tell you to not use it because in order to take advantage of Death Trap, you pretty much need Poison Trap. The reason Death Trap is good is, and it pairs pretty nicely with Poison Trap, is because it's going to suck enemies in, but it's also going to just do crazy damage. And if you happen to kill an enemy, it's going to reduce the cooldown by 10 seconds. So it has very nice synergy here. The Poison Trap, like I said, has super small radius. You plop it down, you plop down the Death Trap. The Death Trap sucks all the enemies into the Poison Trap. They all get CC'd. You deal a ton of damage to them. And that's also going to synergize very, very well with our key passive Exposure, where anytime we deal direct damage to an enemy affected by a trap, it has a 25% chance to reduce the cooldown of our trap skills by 20%, and it's also going to drop some stun grenades, which is nice just for getting more CC. Reducing the cooldown here is very important because if you play Death Trap without Exposure on, you're not really going to have a good time because the cooldown is just going to be way too long. It'll be like around 30 seconds because most of the time it's going to kill an enemy. So you pretty much need to use Poison Trap so that you're always trapping enemies and always being able to take advantage of Exposure here, which is a little bit unfortunate because I really like Momentum and some of the other stuff here, but it's pretty much mandatory for this build. When it comes to our specialization here, it's between Inner Sight and Preparation. Personally, with this build, I prefer Inner Sight. I just feel like the energy generation is a lot more consistent, but if you feel like your Death Trap cooldown is just way too long, you can swap on Preparation for doing like ad clearing, and then right before a boss fight, literally just pop open your menu, boom, Inner Sight, and that's what I do a lot. I really like Preparation because personally when I play the build, my goal is just Death Trap like constantly, and in order to do that you need a lot of like really good gear to get trap cooldown reduction and other stuff. So preparation is really nice for just further reducing the cooldown on that. But until you can get all that gear, you know, it's nice to use. But Inner Sight generally is going to be better. And for bosses, 100% swap to Inner Sight. When it comes to the skill tree here, honestly, there really isn't much to deviate from. Like, for the most part, it's pretty set in stone what you want to go for. You want to go for Puncture for the vulnerable, max out your Twisting Blades. I have +4 ranks on my gloves. Make sure to get that. And then when it comes to some damage reduction, we get 12% with Sturdy. Siphoning Strikes is our heal. Very, very good. Stutter Step. Oh, why do I have Stutter Step on, dude? I guess I was using this for farming. You could definitely feel free to swap this on if you want, but probably not going to be using it. Shadow Step here for the stun and the crit chance. 3 points into concussive. This is fantastic, and one of the reasons that traps are good, because we're going to be knocking back and knocking down enemies constantly. 12% extra crit chance, but it's only against them, so it's not as powerful. But poison trap is guaranteed knocking those enemies down, so pretty much have that all the time. Trick attack is nice whenever you crit a dazed enemy, which we're going to do with our legendaries. It's also going to knock them down for just further concussive benefit, and also just really nice for the CC. Then we have dash, and with enhanced dash for the 15% crit damage modifier. With an extra skill point, you can put this into Discipline Dash, but I don't have the extra skill point, which we'll talk about in a second. 3 points into Exploit and Malice. Never take these off. These are multiplicative. These are insane. Always go for that. Oh, I forgot to mention Weapon Mastery. I have 6 out of 3 here. You can get 3 points on your amulet. Very powerful. Then we go into the poison stuff. This is really good. The poison damage kind of sucks, because Poison Trap doesn't really do that much damage because it can't crit, yada yada. But mainly we're using this for the alchemical advantage. If there's 15 enemies, this is 15% attack speed. Only put 1 point in here. You could put 3 points if you wanted, actually, but we'll talk about it in a second. And then you want 3 points into Debilitating Toxins. This is better than 15% damage reduction, because it means the enemies deal 15% less to you, so it's a separate modifier than your damage reduction, not affected by diminishing returns, yada yada. That's really good. I have 3 points into Frigid Finesse here because I'm using the unique boots. If you have the boots on, this is insane, 15% damage. Feel free to watch my video on the boots, link in the description. If you don't have those, I'll talk about the 3 skill points in a second. Innervation for a lot of energy generation, very good. Trap Mastery, even more critical strike chance. Death Trap maxed out, obviously. Adrenaline Rush into 3 points into Haste. Haste is mainly for movement speed, but you do get a little bit of attack speed here and there. And then obviously Exposure. In terms of if you want to deviate at all, if you don't have the boots, obviously you don't want to put 3 points into Frigid Finesse, so where would you put it? 3 points that I would recommend, probably 2 would be Alchemical Advantage, because that's just more damage. If you want more survivability, you could go 3 points into Rugged. If you want even more survivability, you're having a really hard time, take the points out of Haste and the points out of Adrenaline Rush here. Put 3 points into Rugged, 3 points into Reactive Defense. That'll probably help you out a little bit. You could put 1 point into Rapid Gambit, because you're going to be dazing enemies a lot with the Legendary. So if you want just further reduced evade cooldown and you want to dodge a lot, that's something that's really nice to put a point into. And you could also put the point into Dash Slows enemies. Feel free to deviate. Obviously, a lot of people want me to tell them exactly, but it's going to depend on, you know, your personal preference. Personally, if I wasn't using 3 points into Frigid Finesse, I would probably max out Alchemical, and then I'd put the point into Discipline Dash. But this is a very offensive version of the setup, so feel free to go defensive if that is more your thing. All right, let's get into the gear. Again, I'm going to have an updated version of this on my website. I'm just going to speed run all the legendaries really quickly, just talk about like the 4 that you care about the most, and then I'll just go over each individual piece and the roles that you want on them. Keep in mind that my build right now is not perfectly optimized for this, because I'm swapping around and I'm testing a lot of stuff, and I don't want to delete my other builds and make them not function. So some of the stuff I'm going to show you guys is not actually equipped on my character. Sorry for that, but again, stuff will be written on the website for like mandatory stuff, whatever. Mandatory legendary aspects, Twisting Blades Orbit, that's insanely good. If you're having survivability issues, or just in general, Disobedience is literally the best legendary in the game. 50% armor all the time. If you have survivability issues, put this on. If you have a low roll of this, put it on your amulet, because it'll roll higher. It cannot go on a two-handed weapon though. By the way, obviously make sure the Twisting Blades thing is on your two-handed weapon, because it does double the damage. But anyways, Disobedience, unbelievably insane. You need this. The third most important thing, again, survivability. Most people, that's what their issue is survivability, right? So Aspect of Might, 20% damage reduction for 6 seconds anytime you use your basic skill. Gonna be using Puncture a lot, so definitely make sure to slap this on. Personally, I don't have it on right now, and that is because I'm using the unique pants, which I made a video on yesterday. The majority of you guys aren't going to have this, and If I was going to play this build more, I'm probably going to find a way to slot this in. Right now, I just can't because of my current gear. Anyways, the next most important thing is getting blast trappers here for a chance to make enemies vulnerable when they are affected by your trap skill. This just helps you for, you know, additional vulnerable application. However, with our glyphs, which we'll talk about when we get to the Paragon board, you have guaranteed vulnerable when you enter a pack anyways. So I don't think this is worth it on the amulet. This is more for single target vulnerable application, but it's still very powerful and probably mandatory with the build. Aspect of the Umbral is great for just getting more energy generation because we're CCing enemies a ton. So like the mandatory legendaries, and obviously I'll show the other ones that I think are really powerful with the build. So getting into our helmet, what you want on here is maximum life probably. Percent armor is incredibly powerful. Maximum energy is really good to just overall increase your energy generation. And then for the last thing, you probably want cooldown reduction. The helmet I'm not 100% sure on, but resistances seem to be kind of a bait. So I'd kind of ignore resistances. Try to get armor, max life, and cooldown reduction. That's probably what you're after on the helmet here. On the chest piece, try to get as much defensive stuff as possible. The damage is additive, so it's not that great. You want percent armor, damage reduction from close. That is crazy good, okay? For the legendary we have, dealing direct damage to a vulnerable enemy has a chance to daze them. Constantly dealing damage to vulnerable enemies has a chance to daze all the time, which counts for, you know, crowd controlling them for damage versus crowd controlled, and also restoring energy. Just really nice. If anything were to be swappable, it would probably be this. You do not need this for the build because we already have a lot of CC with our poison trap. Also, people seem to have a hard time getting this one. Then on the gloves here, the gloves can have some really crazy stuff. The main thing that you want on here is ranks of twisting blades. That's crazy good. After that, you want crit chance, and then you want trap skill cooldown reduction, and then you want attack speed. This lucky hit chance of slow is actually quite good because it really works well with our Umbral here, but attack speed is just simply going to be better because you can get like 15% attack speed. That's just crazy. And then we have even more attack speed with the accelerating aspect. This one is a little bit optional, but when you have inner sight up, 23% attack speed is crazy for just increasing your uptime on doing damage, right? Temerity is good for the barrier, pairing that with my amulet to give me extra barrier stuff. Most people aren't going to have this, so you would just slap on might instead, right? And then keep on the vulnerable thing here. When it comes to what to get on the pants, sorry, I've not looked at the pants. I don't really know what rolls in here that's all that good. Try to get like damage versus distance. I think you can get on here. Anything survivability oriented, I think you can get dexterity for some damage. That's going to be good for you. For the boots, best in slot is Penitent Greaves. Try to get these. Made a video on that. It crowd controls enemies. You deal extra damage to chilled enemies. Movement speed is fantastic. Otherwise, just try to get some survivability oriented stuff. I don't think boots really have much in terms of damage. When it comes to the crossbow, this is incredibly important. All these stats do count. Obviously, you want the twisting blades thing here. Oh, by the way, if you don't have the Penitent Greaves, you want to put on double Shadow Step. Double Shadow Step is incredibly powerful, but ultimately this is going to be better for offensive sort of stuff, and Shadow Step is more defensive, okay? For the crossbow here, you want double damage to vulnerable. This is crazy. You can get well over 100% on just one item. Dexterity is crazy because this is 15% extra damage on its own multiplier. Very good. Crit damage is the next best thing. After that, you either want core skill damage or damage to close. Damage to close is probably better because it's going to benefit your trap skill, while core skill damage does not benefit your trap skill. You want to slot in emeralds here, and then on all of your gear you want topazes, and on your jewelry you want skulls. For the necklace, there's a lot of good things. You want 3 ranks of weapon mastery. It's the most important because it just gives you so much extra damage. Movement speed is good, but you can get amulets with like crazy cooldown reduction. This one has like energy cost reduction, but you can get like, I'm trying to see if I have one. I think you can get trap skill cooldown reduction on here, which is fantastic, but you can also get damage reduction twice. You can get damage reduction to close and just damage reduction straight up. You can also get ranks of the Frigid Finesse if you're using the boots, which is damage versus chilled. So my perfect amulet would be 3 ranks to weapon mastery, 3 ranks to Frigid Finesse, and then damage reduction and damage reduction versus close. And I would swap maybe one of those for trap skill cooldown reduction if you can get that, or just general cooldown reduction. I have the barrier thing here, but obviously you can't get that. For those of you that don't have that, in terms of what you want to put on your amulet for the 50% effectiveness, the critical strikes with core skills increase your attack speed is very good. Or you could put Edge Masters here, which is just 20% extra damage, which would then be 30% on the amulet when you have inner sight, which is fantastic. My rings are absolutely terrible. This one isn't that bad actually, but this ring literally is terrible. On the rings, vulnerable damage is the most important, and you can get crit chance. Those are probably the 2 most important stats, vulnerable and crit chance. After that, You can get like damage to close, damage to poison, damage to enemies with traps, and anything survivability oriented. I think you get maximum energy too, or max life. That's probably what you're looking for. But again, vulnerable and crit chance is the best. When it comes to the weapons here, prioritize the weapon damage. I'm using 2 swords because it works well with weapon mastery. If you happen to get Ashira's Kanjar, this is really good for the attack speed, and I would probably swap it out for this legendary where making an enemy vulnerable has a chance to increase your critical strike chance. Not 100% sure though. I really do like the crit from this, and we have a lot of crit damage with this build, so it's pretty good. I think swords are better, generally speaking, but if you have daggers, don't worry too much about it, right? When it comes to what stats you want on here, the most important thing is the item power so that it's a higher weapon damage. After that, you want to get vulnerable damage and dexterity. This weapon that I have right here is pretty much perfect. Dexterity, vulnerable, core skill damage, damage to close, and crit damage. That's really, really fantastic. This one isn't as great because I don't really slow enemies that much. I don't really like daze or damage to crowd control because it's just way more conditional. So I have like 3 stats on this one that I don't really like, whereas this one is just damage all the time, and this one is missing vulnerable damage. That's the most important stuff. When it comes to the Paragon, I'm not going to lie to you, mine is entirely scuffed for this setup. I'm going to go over it really quickly, but I'll have a link to a Paragon board on my website and in the description for one that is probably just more optimal for the trap stuff. But if you want to see it, I'll show it to you guys. But again, it's pretty scuffed. So first off, I went for closer for the damage reduction. This is pretty much like how you want to set it up, I think, if you're starting out and you're just getting to endgame, because the 2 most important things is getting closer for the cooldown, or sorry, for the damage reduction, and then getting exploit for the guaranteed vulnerable application. These are incredibly powerful. I spent a lot of points getting all this crit damage and damage to healthy, but also getting no witness to make my death trap do 30% more damage, and it gives me 10% damage that I have up pretty much 100% of the time. Then I went into the cheap shot board. Cheap shot is insane because you're constantly crowd controlling enemies. 5% extra damage there is fantastic. You get a bunch of damage versus crowd controlled up here as well. And then I put in the combat glyph, which I need to get to level 15. It's pretty bad until you get to level 15. But there's a good amount of intelligence nodes here that you can grab to just increase your crit damage with core skills, which is a great thing to get. And also going to give you some energy cost refund, which is going to be really nice. I pathed down, got the damage to healthy nodes, which I really liked. And then I went to the Trapper build to get Deadly Ambush, 23% increased crit damage to enemies affected by our traps. That is crazy good. There's a lot of really good stuff on this board that I'm missing. The glyph that I went here is Ambush. I don't even have this maxed out, but basically you want to get all the strength nodes around here to get enemies affected by your trap skills take 10% increased damage. Like I said, in the description, I'll have a fixed version of this because this is so scuffed. Down here, you can get a bunch of damage to enemies affected by trap skills, but this is additive, so it's not as good. There's also more trap skill damage, but I think you more or less are going to ignore that. One of the better stuff that you can get here is a trap skill cooldown reduction, and reduces the time to arm your traps. This is really good, and it's not that far out of the way, but I beelined it to damage reduction versus enemies with traps because that's just added damage reduction. That's really fantastic. After this board, I'm not entirely sure. Probably go for a 5th board and go for the glyph slot. Again, I'll update this in the future, but this is what I'm just running right now. That's pretty much it for the video though. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. If you did, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe for videos similar to this one, and I'll have an updated Shadow Rogue video coming out pretty soon, and there's a lot of videos in the pipeline. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.